I mean, honestly, that's why you see
True.
so many of these players being drafted later. And I think that's why so many drafters avoid them. Oh, that guy's never healthy. And it's, well, yeah, that's why you get the opportunity to draft him in the 9th, 10th, 11th round. That's why it's a sleeper, man. Like at that point, the risk is sort of baked into the AD.
Public service announcement. If you're drafting today and you don't draft Jonathan Taylor in round 3, then why are you drafting? Like, just don't draft right now.
There it is.
Like, you got to buy the dip, man. We're going to get news on this stuff. Brees Hall in round 4. If anybody here is following me on Twitter, like, I'm posting these things every night. I'm not drafting on Underdog right now because people aren't budging on ADPs. I'm like full in on DraftKings right now.
I got Cooper Kupp at 109 yesterday.
Dude, people are losing their minds in these streets.
Today, we're looking at sleepers to target in your fantasy football drafts. And, well, Dave Kluge and I are joined by a fantastic guest, Dwain McFarland over at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. And Dwayne's been doing some amazing research all off season, just pumping out data day after day. And Dwayne, I got to go to you first and ask, who is your top sleeper this year for fantasy football?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of funny, right? Because it's not a name that we would have thought of as a sleeper, but when you look at their ADP this year, like a guy that I'm drafting so much is Russell Wilson. Now, again, like there's other quarterbacks I like, but when I look at Russ Wilson, yeah, he averaged 16 points per game last year. That was a career low. That was a complete faceplant, right? That is bombing. You probably took him in round 8 of your draft, somewhere around there. And, you weren't happy about it. This is a player you had to likely just release from your roster and start over. And you're thinking, Dwayne, like, come on, man. What are you talking about? Well, there's a couple things. Number one, there's just Russell Wilson's overall body of work, right, over his career. And this is a player that, has recently posted over 20 points per game. Yeah, even the season before last wasn't great, but he battled that finger injury. If you go look back at the first 8 weeks of that season, it was actually pretty good. So I'm just someone that, knowing how quarterbacks can play for a long time in the league nowadays, and looking at Russell Wilson, I like to lean in just to really the bigger body of work. And a big part of it is like he's going like QB 16, 17 right now on Underdog. I think that's really cheap. The other part is we get Sean Payton coming in. So this is a coach. When he's at a competent quarterback, he has had some of the best offenses in the league. And then you can also just look one last point, like at the very end of last season, it was like things kind of started to click for Russ. Actually, once Nathaniel Hackett was gone, right, which, Sean Payton obviously just came out and completely trashed, in the media without calling out names, but just talking about how bad of a coaching job was going on in Denver last year. But when you look at really the way he and Judy started to connect down the stretch, you actually had four out of the last 5 games, I believe it was, for Russ, where he posted really great fantasy numbers. He still had one dud in there. So anyway, I lean back on that 23.7 points per game we saw just in 2020, and then what he did at the end of last year and bringing in Sean Payton. And I like the weapons overall. Like, I don't think they're like all elite, but I like Jerry Jeudy. I think Cortland Sutton, I know it's not popular to say anything about Cortland Sutton, like he's just kind of meh, but he's okay. Right. And then I really like Marvin Mims as a rookie. And then Greg Dulcich at tight end also flashed last year. So, and one last thing, Vegas backs this up. If you go look right now over on, most odds makers anyway, like you can check out and you can look at like their projections for points over the 17 weeks, like each game. If you look at Denver, they are projected for the second biggest increase in points per game, behind only the Jets, who added Aaron Rodgers. So I think Vegas is seeing the same things, looking at a team that was just dysfunctional. You had the coach and leaning into Russ's history and the weapons. So I'm really big on Russell Wilson this year.
Yeah, I feel like you kind of have to look at last year, and you can come to 2 conclusions. Either one, it was just an outlier season because he had his lowest touchdown rate and highest interception rate since his rookie season, or the other conclusion is that Russell Wilson just forgot how to play football. And I'm not going to concede that a 34-year-old Russell Wilson just forgot how to play football completely. So I'm with you. And where he's getting drafted right now, like you said, he was the QB 18 in points per game last year. Or I'm sorry, he was a QB 17 in points per game last year. Getting drafted as the QB 18 right now. So we're basically drafting him below his floor. I'm completely with you. There's like no risk in drafting Wilson this year.
Yeah, Dwayne, you mentioned a couple guys there with Russ Wilson, and it's funny because last week I was saying the exact same thing. I was talking about Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy, how in those final 4 or 5 weeks, they were one of the best duos in all of fantasy football right there with Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. Like, it was just it was weird. It was such a tale of two different sides of the season for them. So going into this season, you're taking a look at Russell Wilson. You mentioned a couple of names, right? Like Greg Dulcich, Marvin Mims, Cortland Sutton, and
Yeah.
is there
Wait, who'd
some
you say there? Who'd you say? Cortland Sutton?
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there one of these guys that you look at and say, I really want to try to pair him with Russ as often as I can? Or is it really just, I believe in Russ, I believe in this Broncos offense, I'm kind of cool with any of them?
I think Jerry Jeudy is the best receiver in the group, and he's really been a guy that's been unhealthy. But last year, if you look at the games where he just didn't leave with injury, like we'll just use that as a simple filter, right? And he actually got to play the first game. I mean, the full game. He actually was a wide receiver 1 in points per game, 16.1 points per game in a PPR. So I get it. He hasn't fully broken out or maybe lived up to the expectations some of us had when he was an early first round pick, for the Broncos, or a mid first round pick out of Alabama. But again, a guy that's just really been riddled by injuries. So I think there's a chance that we just haven't seen the best from Jerry Jeudy. We haven't seen him be able to have that whole season where he puts it all together. So I really like him. He's at 17% rostership for me right now over on Underdog, which is in my top 3 for receivers I'm taking in the first 5 rounds, right? There are guys I have more, but it's like, oh, I'm getting them in round like 13, 14. And I'll go ahead and name the other one. It is Marvin Mims. Like, he's a guy I already like, but now with Tim Patrick out of the way, man, he's almost a lock, right, to be in these 3 wide receiver sets. And he does the things that Russ likes. Like, if you watch Marvin Mims on film, and even if you look at his data, like, he had a 16.7 ADOT over his college career. That's 79th percentile for the data that I track. 87th percentile explosive target rate. 32% of his targets in college went for 15 plus yards. This was a guy that was a really highly lauded recruit coming out of Texas when he went to Oklahoma, and his game just translates. He's great on these deep crossers. He's great on these vertical routes. A lot of the things where we saw Russ struggle last year. Now, kind of to Dave's point, like, did Russ Wilson forget how to play or what's going on here? The one caveat I would say is the NFL is waiting for the offenses to produce the counterpunch. And it's not really the too high safety. Too high safeties is only 20% of plays, but it's how far off the ball the deep safety is playing all the time. So basically, there's no angle. It's like, oh, I can't make a mistake in coverage. I'm just trying to take away your deep pass. I'm going to make it a contested catch. So we'll see. What do these offenses do this year? We saw the Chiefs do it last year. They're like, Mahomes was actually who we maybe never thought could do this. He was like, fine, I'm just going to keep just hitting you with everything underneath. So we'll see what the Broncos do this year. I do think for all of this to click and work, Russ is going to have to adapt. But I think if there's a coach that can do that for him, it's Sean Payton, who just gets a lot out of his design looks. Think of all the screens and everything that Sean Payton has really created. Honestly, just free yardage for his teams in the past. So I think this is going to be really big for Russ to find a counterpunch to all the deep safety looks.
Let's just hope he can do it. I mean, again, I think all 3 of us are in agreement that we do like Russ Wilson, but I did get a little nervous about the report that came out a few days ago where Sean Payton said that he is struggling with timing and he's struggling with his footwork, because that is what this offense requires. And Drew Brees was a master at that, where Russell Wilson has always been kind of the let me scramble around and just launch a moon ball and make magic happen.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm in agreement with you, but I will.
And to be fair, hey, he did struggle.
That report made me nervous.
Yeah, well, Wilson did struggle with that some in Seattle in that first year when they really installed the Rams' old offense. So I think it is a legit concern. But I think what Peyton will have to do, you have to find a blend. How do you build those things into Russ's repertoire, but still leave him open to do the things he needs to do? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if Russ is going to be back to cooking in 2023. We're going to continue on here with a few more sleepers, but before we do that, I want to let you know, if you've been enjoying this discussion so far, please just like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be bringing you these episodes all throughout the preseason, 2 episodes a week, and then when we get into the actual regular season, man, guys, football's almost here. We're going to be giving you 5 episodes a week, including a live start sit every Sunday morning. So don't forget, subscribe to the channel, drop your questions, in the comments below. And, I just want to say really quick, it's that time of year. We're all getting ready for our fantasy drafts. And if you're looking for a nice, easy place to have all your rankings, your average draft position, all the research you need in one easy place, head on over to footballguys.com, get yourself an elite subscription for just $5.79 a month. And Dave, all of our audience members can continue to do their part to save the economy by putting money back into fantasy football. That's how we're going to fix it. All right. Let's get back to the good stuff. Dave, I know you've got a sleeper on here that's probably going to make me a little cranky, so just get to it.
I mean, this is year 3 of me pounding the table for Damian Harris. I think at this point, like I'm just his de facto agent. I'm waiting for some of the royalties from this contract that he just signed with Buffalo to come my way, but I just can't get enough of this guy. And back in 2020, 2021, which was the last season that we saw him fully healthy, he was graded as PFF's best running back. He was also graded as their fifth best rusher, and that was the same year that he led the league in touchdowns. That year, he also had 14 rushes go for 15 plus yards, which was the 5th most in the league. I just think that he is such a underrated running back. And granted, a lot of that production that we saw in 2021 did come from touchdowns, but he was an RB3 or better in 80% of his games. So even when he wasn't scoring touchdowns, he was still ripping off enough big plays that he was able to maintain a relatively safe floor. The story of his career so far has been injuries. He missed 14 games in 2019. He missed 6 in 2020. Even in 2021, when he led the league in touchdowns, he missed a couple of games, and then he missed 6 last year. He was limited in 4 others. But if he is healthy, and a very big but here.
I was about to say, you're not
Phrasing,
making a good case for
but.
yourself right now. You just kept saying he's never healthy. He's missing games. And like, you're really just beating it down.
That's been the caveat. But when he is healthy, he's one of the best running backs in the league. And if he's healthy in this offense, he is going to just demolish his ADP this year. He steps into a role that was vacated by Devin Singletary, where Devin Singletary had back-to-back top 24 seasons. And I don't think that he was even in a role that was made for him. They were asking him to run between the tackles and do these things that a 5'9" guy with not a lot of burst shouldn't really be doing. And now you see Damian Harris, who's heavier, taller, stronger, faster, more explosive. He's tailor made for the role that they want him to be in. Now, it's going to be capped because we're not going to see a ton of pass volume going to running backs from Josh Allen. And then, of course, Josh Allen is going to steal some of the touches at the goal line as well. But if Devin Singletary could put up top 24 numbers in this offense, it is an easy floor for Damian Harris. The only thing holding him back is potential health. But where he's getting drafted right now, it's baked into his ADP. I cannot stop drafting Damian Harris.
So that's actually not the guy I thought you were going to talk about. So I'm not as cranky about this one, but I do have to ask this, and I want to get Dwayne's opinion on this because I mean I already know you and the audience knows you, but for Dwayne, we've had so many reports about James Cook being the guy in camp that they see him having a 3-down role, and it keeps coming out. Offensive coordinators are in love with him and they want to deploy him in all different ways. How much do those camp reports really start to change your opinion on things? Or, I mean, even if you were already higher on James Cook over Damian Harris, does that kind of, widen the gap for you?
Yeah. And look, I don't think this will be the popular answer. I know everyone wants us to just have a take, right? And pick between players. But like the bane of my existence this year in fantasy, and I think it's hurting drafters, it's hurting analysts, is we box ourselves into these scenarios where we have to choose either or. Oh, I'm in camp James Cook. Oh, I'm in camp Damian Harris. I see a path for these two players in this particular offense where they can both be successful. And they could also both completely smash, right? I do think ADP is correct in having James Cook as the first back off the board, but that doesn't mean I don't like Damian Harris. Everything that Dave just said is true. Like Damian Harris, when I watch the man run the football, I enjoy it. Like it warms my heart. He's so violent. He always gets extra yardage. Like you don't want to be like off balance if you're a DB and you're meeting with him. That's going to just be a bad experience like for your life. So I agree. Damian Harris is a good player. I think the thing is with Cook is like if everything went right for him, we know that he also has the receiving chops, which is the hardest part to do in the NFL. There's only a few that can do it. Now, to be fair, last year I was big on James Cook. It didn't come through. Like he did not get the he was only out there for 21% of the team's routes. But what I will say, when he was out there, he flashed all those things we already saw in college. He had a 26% targets per route run. That's in line with guys like Kamara, Eckler, 1.43 yards per route run. So he was really good.
He also led the league in breakaway run rate.
Yeah, 13% of his carries went for 10 plus yards or more. So he's also explosive on the ground. So there's a lot to like with James Cook. And I do think in a world where everything goes right, like you hit bigger on James Cook than you do on Damian Harris. But again, that's just running completely pure. If everything goes a player's way, the most likely outcome is somewhere in between. James Cook has a role on this team. Damian Harris has a role on this team. And honestly, they are a duo I'm willing to draft both of. And the reason why is I think they, if it works out the way we think in the median, somewhere in the middle, they have very different roles. Damian Harris is going to be scoring all the touchdowns from inside the 5-yard line. James Cook is going to take the 2-minute offense and a pass-first offense. In that scenario, there's a way both of these guys get there. And if either one of them go down, there's contingent value, especially for for Damian Harris. With Naheem Hines gone, the contingency plan for James Cook is gone, right? The contingency plan for Damian Harris is actually still there. It's called Latavius Murray,
Oh,
right?
Latavius.
They have a clear archetype that they like in their backs, and they like to have these two players. They've kind of been trying to get towards this for the last couple of years. So I really like both of them. I draft James Cook a lot, but I also draft Damian Harris. So I think there's a clear argument for both players, and neither one is wrong in this particular instance.
So I agree with everything you said, Dwayne. I love James Cook as well. Me touting Damian Harris wasn't saying forget about James Cook. I'm completely with you that they both have paths where they can succeed even if they're both healthy. But then, of course, if one of them does go down with an injury, then it opens up a huge ceiling for the other as well. So I like them both. But since this show is titled and talking about sleepers, I wanted to go with the RB2. He's getting drafted a little bit later.
I feel you. I feel you. And I knew you weren't saying that, but you know how it goes out in these Twitter streets. I call it Twitter. You guys can call it X.
They like Damian Harris, so he must hate James Cook.
You have to pick.
People love to drag Dave in the comments, no matter what social media app it is, X, Instagram, YouTube. It doesn't matter. They just hate Dave. It's great.
Hey, I get it.
Nourished by
hatred.
Their hatred fuels you. I love it. All right. Well, you know what? It's funny. Dwayne, you mentioned kind of giving sort of a cop-out answer. I'm about to give my sleeper, and it's the biggest cop-out on the whole show. So everyone's going to turn this off right now. I went back and forth thinking, okay, am I going to pick Zay Flowers or am I picking Rashad Bateman here? And I ended up just writing Baltimore Ravens wide receiver. That's it. It's honest because like that's the fair thing to do is in your draft is whichever one falls to you, right? And we also kind of have to play a little bit of a wait and see approach. There's not many leagues that are drafting right now. We kind of have to see how camp continues to go. Is Rashad Bateman actually going to be healthy enough to start participating again? And where this all kind of started from, right, is it seems like everyone is in love with the potential for Lamar Jackson this season, not just from his own fantasy standpoint and the rushing, but the now elevated ceiling for passing and what Todd Monken brings to this offense. And we already know what Mark Andrews brings to this offense and how that relationship kind of works. But this is going to be something new where we're going to see an offense that's now going to be going out there and employing 2 to 3 wide receivers on the field at a time, not running as much 12 personnel. Every time I bring this up, I always like to explain it. So Ravens were last at 11 personnel last season. When I say 11 and 12 personnel, 11 personnel is 1 running back and 1 tight end. And then when I say 12, that's 2 tight ends. Okay. So they typically had guys like Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely out there. So now with Todd Monken's offense, you're going to see a lot more of the 1 tight end set and getting a lot of those wide receivers out there to spread the field for Lamar. And it's so interesting for me that we are so in love with Lamar Jackson and the excitement around this Ravens offense. But right now, both these wide receivers are being drafted outside the top 42 wide receivers on Underdog Fantasy. They're outside of the top 48 wide receivers according to the Football Guys consensus ADP. So it's interesting to me because if the passing volume is going to continue to go up for Lamar, and we've seen the efficiency be there as well, there's got to be someone else that's going to benefit from this that's not named Mark Andrews. And we've seen this before. A lot of those passes don't necessarily end up in the hands of J.K. Dobbins. Something I found that was really interesting regarding the 11 personnel stuff that I was mentioning. So Todd Monken does want to run that 11 personnel and spread things out. The Cincinnati Bengals, Cleveland Browns, and Pittsburgh Steelers all ranked bottom 10 against 11 personnel last year in yards given up per play on those. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that works out this year. Zay Flowers, I think we have seen that rookie wide receivers are producing at higher rates and producing early and often. Rashad Bateman, if he's healthy, his per snap production and his per game production has been good. It's kind of another Damian Harris situation here where you just want to make sure a guy is going to be healthy and you don't know. If we're in a vacuum, like Dwayne said, and your fantasy Twitter is forcing me to pick, I'd probably go with Zay Flowers here. But honestly, depending on how the reports continue, I'd be fine with either of these guys. Dwayne, I'd love to hear your opinion on this and see, is there a Baltimore Ravens pass catcher? Maybe the guy didn't mention Odell Beckham that you're really interested in. I'm not. I'm out on OBJ.
That's what I was going to say. If we're trying to, not hear what's not being said, what I took away from everything you just said is that you hate Odell Beckham.
I don't hate him. I don't know him. I just don't want to draft him for fantasy.
I mean, I get it. 31 coming off a twice torn ACL, but yeah, I'm with you. I like Bateman and Flowers over Odell, but Dwayne, Love to hear what you got to say.
No, I think honestly, again, it's another one where it is the right approach. If everything was really nice and clean and I knew everyone was healthy, my pick would be Bateman because he had such a tantalizing collegiate profile. And to your point, we just haven't seen him healthy. It's kind of back to that Jerry Jeudy conversation we had earlier. But in the small moments, we've got to see him. Like the flash has been there. It would be one thing if he hadn't been a first round pick, if he hadn't been so good in college to see that flash and you could be like, well, small sample. But
Right.
when I see that and I'm like, well, it like matches what we saw in college, it tells me that, okay, I probably shouldn't let go of this yet. Like I need to hang on a little more. Like he's just probably the most complete receiver they have at this point. But with the injury news, like it's just opening the door for Zay Flowers to build that chemistry, for Zay Flowers to earn reps. And Flowers, even though like in our, fantasy life supermodel for wide receivers, where we basically take all the data points that correlate the most to future fantasy production. We put it all in one nice little model for you, and we rank everybody. And Flowers, like he came out a little bit low, but it was mostly because he was an older prospect. But there's really no arguing like what he did when he was out there. Like his target shares over the last 3 years, 28%, 28%, and 31%. And people are like, oh, well, he's just an underneath slot receiver. No, he's not. Like this guy was attacking downfield. He played outside. He played inside. His average depth of target was 13 yards. He plays a lot bigger than he is. There's a lot to like about Zay Flowers' game. All the reports early out of camp, have been really good. Like it's hard to know with those things. A lot of times that can just be fluff. So we got to kind of piece it together. We'll see some preseason games, but I think your approach, Alfredo, is correct. And I will say, as Bateman's fallen down, Zay's creeped up a little bit. So I'm kind of in this mode now where in drafts, I'm like, well, I'm just going to take Bateman. Like people are letting me get him like a round to 2 rounds later than where he was going before. But I also understand people listening to the show may have a draft coming up where they just have to put, a stake down in one. I would still say in that scenario, Bateman is my favorite when everything's a clean picture. And now you're giving him to me at the lowest ADP. He's the guy I want. OBJ I'm like you guys. He's the one I draft the least. However, like we have to have some, humility here. We can be wrong about things. And if we do like the Ravens offense, like there are scenarios when I have Lamar Jackson, I'm much more willing to take OBJ if I've already got Lamar on the team. When I don't have Lamar, I'm pretty much not drafting OBJ. I think I've got 2 or 3% across 160 drafts. And I know, Dave, that like you've done 7,000 drafts, so I'd be interested like in your rostership. But I'm kind of staying away if I don't have Lamar.
And the one thing I'll riff off of what you're saying here as to why you prefer Bateman off of Zay Flowers, especially this year. I think long term I like Zay Flowers, but for this year I prefer Bateman. And if you look over the last few years, kind of how they have, groomed and developed these wide receivers here, it's like rookie seasons. These guys are nothing but field stretchers. We saw it with Marquise Brown, we saw it with Devin Duvernay, and we saw it with Rashad Bateman. And then it was like year 2 and year 3, we saw them to start get a little bit more versatile in their route tree and start doing some other things. So that is kind of the one thing that scares me with Zay Flowers. We know he has versatility, but just with the blueprint that we've seen the Ravens lay out for the last few years, Zay Flowers might be stuck in a role this year where he is just kind of stretching the field, where Bateman is more the do-it-all guy all over the place. And again, might be totally galaxy braining this, but that's just my takeaway from what I've seen from the Ravens over the last 5 or 6 years.
I will say typically these receivers, their average depth of target that they bring with them from college like translates, but it's not always one for one. There are gimmicky things that happen with offenses and stuff like that for sure. But your last point, I think, is the most important one. And that's kind of where I was going with Bateman. Like he is the guy that can bring down the contested catch. He is the guy that can be your intermediate, chain mover. Like if you need it in a really tight spot, not to say Flowers can't, like this guy's really quick in space, but like, I think Bateman has the broadest application in the most different scenarios right now, if he's healthy. And that's why I would choose him. I'm with you.
Yeah, I think that we've come across a major theme across these first 3 players, which is if he's healthy. And I think that's why you see these players. I mean, honestly, that's why you see so many of these players being drafted later. And I think that's why so many drafters avoid them. Oh, that guy's never healthy. And it's, well, yeah, that's why you get the opportunity to draft him in the 9th, 10th, 11th round. That's why it's a sleeper, man. Like at that point, the risk is sort of baked into the
public service announcement. If you're drafting today and you don't draft Jonathan Taylor in round 3, then why are you drafting? Like, just don't draft right now. Like, you got to buy the dip, man. We're going to get news on this stuff. Breece Hall in round 4. If anybody here is following me on Twitter, like I'm posting these things every night. I'm not drafting on Underdog right now because people aren't budging on ADPs. I'm like full in on DraftKings right now.
I got Cooper Kupp at 109 yesterday.
Dude, people are losing their minds in these streets. So yeah, I'm with you, Alfredo. You gotta buy the dip if you're drafting right now. Like, unless you just got a weird league, most leagues, like if you're just gonna have your one league, it's your home league, you're not drafting today. And if you are, like, yeah, come on, like, commish, we got to have a conversation unless there's some kind of scheduling conflict. In the age of technology, I can't imagine it. But most people that are drafting today are doing best ball. Like, so you got to be buying the dip, in my opinion. Sorry, that was a complete tangent, but like you triggered me.
No, that's all good, man. So we're going to continue here with a few more sleepers, but before we do that, we want to let you guys know we got a major giveaway before the season even starts. What we're doing is we are giving you a chance to go head to head against me and Dave and a few other audience members in the first ever Football Guys Fantasy Show Listener League. All you have to do, leave a review for the podcast and screenshot that. Send it over to Kluge at footballguys.com. That's Kluge. That's my co-host. Don't flood my inbox with it. I don't want it. You will be automatically out of the league. And I say this every time, and I'm going to keep saying it. You don't have to give a 5-star review, but you're probably not getting in the league if you don't give a 5-star review. Okay. That's just like my nice way of saying, let us know what's up. You can still give us some very fair feedback. Okay. Once again, you can send that over to Kluge at footballguys.com and you'll be entered for a chance to be in the first ever Football Guys Fantasy Football Show Listener League. All right, Dwain, we are back to you with another sleeper. And this is a guy that, man, it's another rookie. And when you put his name into the show sheet today, I was really excited because I have been pumping up this guy all off season. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about him.
Yeah, it's Jayden Reed. So what I'm seeing right now, like, is a lot of the other rookie receivers they've moved up right already, but we've actually seen Jayden Reed, Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, they all fell after the draft. And so part of this is, like, you're just in the cycle of the market where, like, we know second round rookies, which is what Jayden Reed is, like, they have a decent hit rate. And again, I talked about the Fantasy Life supermodel. When you look at the wide receivers and you look at what Jayden Reed has done, he actually scored, really well in the model. In fact, like, where he scored in the model, 15% of the time, those wide receivers have gone on to put up a top 12 finish, a top 6 finish. 27% of the time, they have gone on to put up a top 12 finish in their first 3 years. This is not their career. This is quickly in their career. And 50% of the time, they've been a top 36 wide receiver. So Jayden Reed actually has a lot of traits that translate really well. Number one, his ability to earn targets. You can move them all over the field. I know that early reports out of camp are playing out of slot, and I do think that's where we will start the season, which could be a little rough because you're going to have an offense that wants to run the ball more. They're going to try to run some heavy personnel stuff. So his route participation might not be great, like, out of the gate for you. But just simply put, he's a better player than Romeo Doubs. And this, again, is a guy that played outside and did everything in college. So I expect him by the end of the season to just potentially push Doubs for the overall role, period. Now, what Romeo Doubs did last year as a 4th-round pick was pretty good. Like, it was pretty commendable. But overall, like, if you look at him historically and you comp him out to wide receivers basically with his data points going back to 2012, you get people like Cecil Shorts. Like, you're kind of hoping, oh man, if I got my fingers like really crossed, if I've really got them crossed tightly, man, I might get a wide receiver 3. Like, it's not gonna, Romeo Doubs is not going to break open your fantasy league this year. Let's just put it that way. Jayden Reed has a better chance to do that. If for some reason Christian Watson falters, who I really like, but if he does falter, and anything can happen, I think Reed would have to be the guy, like, to step up. So I just like him from that perspective, and the fact that people just, they're not treating him like all the rest of the rookie wide receivers. So it's like, for me, it's like, buy it up now, because we're eventually going to get a positive report. He's going to do something in training camp, and then he's going to move up in ADP. So it's all those things coming together. But number one, it really is his profile and comparing it to the rest of the roster. We know with wide receivers, talent is by far the number one driver, right? With running backs, we want you to be talented, but ultimately, if there's 10 guys blocking for you and you hand off to Dave, he's going to get a yard or two. Like, he's just going to do it, right? I might not get a yard. I think Dave's got thicker calves than me. I might get negative yards every time. So there's definitely talent involved. But receiver, you can't be successful unless you're really good. Like, history has just proven it. You don't just, oh, he's going to be playing a lot. No, that doesn't work. You can play. Justin Watson, was he good last year, guys? He played all the time for Kansas City. Was he good? No, and he played with Patrick Mahomes and a great offense, right? That's just a great example point. You got to be good. So I really like Reed for those reasons.
And we talk about that all the time that like wide receiver production is predicated on talent and running back production is predicated on opportunity. And it's really as simple as that. You can just bet on talented wide receivers and more likely than not, it's going to end up working out for you.
Yeah, for sure. And with running back, like, yeah, talented on top is good because we talk about explosive rush rate and all those things do correlate to layers. Being so, for example, all things being equal, every running back in the league got 300 carries. Talent would play more of a factor, right? But you still have offensive line. You got all this other stuff going on anyway. But to your point, the opportunity still is the biggest thing for running back. And with coaches, they just do these pesky things with running backs that honestly they don't do with receivers. With running backs are like, well, you're going to get the 2-minute offense. You're going to get the long down distance. You're getting inside the 5. And Miles Sanders, you get everything between the 20. I hope you break a long one. It's like what are we, what? Why are we doing this? It's so confusing with running backs. I mean, with receivers, you rarely get that. If you're the starter and you're on the field, you're just on the field. Like there's a few cases, but it's typically a loaded room where they're like, we got to get all these guys out there. And not many teams have that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jaden Reed, and like slowly but surely, you mentioned Christian Watson as well. I'm becoming a fan of just kind of buying into that Packers offense because there's such an advantage to buying into the unknown because these guys end up being drafted so much later. And I think that's such a big thing that gets played into Jaden Reed. And the unknown comes with Jordan Love, right? Like we could speculate all we want. We just don't know how good he's going to be, but we keep going along with all these ifs and buts. And if Jordan Love is good and he is healthy and Jaden Reed continues to show that he is a top 2 wide receiver on that team, things can go really well for him in his rookie season. So I really love that one, Dwain. Now, Dave, we're finally going to get to the one that makes me a little cranky. And I think you can, I don't know, convince me, make me feel better about it, I guess.
So I love drafting a team's RB2. And if that RB2 has any sort of standalone value, that's just the cherry on top. But for me, I'm always looking at the contingent upside, if the RB1 does go down. And especially this year, I find myself leaning into more and more zero RB builds like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. And one of my favorite targets has been Zach Charbonnet. And, he slid in the draft, ended up going in round 2, but a lot of pundits had him projected to be a first round pick. And if you remember, there were talks about him going to the Chiefs and going to the Bengals and going to the Bills and these running back needy teams that were picking at the end of round 1. And he ended up falling into Seattle's lap, which is terrible because Kenneth Walker was great last year. We wanted to see Kenneth Walker with this workload. Now we're looking at kind of an ambiguous situation. But what I see with Zach Charbonnet is that he is a big guy who could realistically siphon a lot of the high value touches as early as week 1. He's 6'4" and 214 pounds, so he's got a height and weight advantage over Kenneth Walker. And even though he is a bigger guy, he had very surprising abilities in the passing game in college with a 14.5% target share, puts him in the 93rd percentile and almost 3 times higher than what we saw from Kenneth Walker in college. Kenneth Walker's got the speed advantage, of course. He's a much faster guy. You'd assume that being a little bit smaller. But Charbonnet has the height, weight, burst, pass catching, and age advantage. So there is a realistic possibility that we see, what Dwain was just talking about, these confusing head-scratching things that coaches do with the backfield. What happens if Kenneth Walker is that between the 20s guy and then Zach Charbonnet gets the goal line and the passing down work? He could be seeing 1/3 of the amount of touches, but if they are all of the high value touches, he could be the better fantasy football player. So he's a guy right now that is getting drafted way after Kenneth Walker. And I'm not making the argument that he should be drafted ahead of Kenneth Walker because Kenneth Walker did what he did as a rookie and deserves that. But right now you can get Zach Charbonnet so much cheaper in drafts. He projects to take a lot of the high value touches, and he has immense contingent upside if, God forbid, something does happen to Kenneth Walker. So I cannot stop drafting. I said the same exact thing about Damian Harris. Can't stop drafting Damian Harris, and I can't stop drafting Zach Charbonnet either.
Yeah, and I think we're already seeing that it might start to pay dividends for some people already. Kenneth Walker already has a groin injury. Zach Charbonnet is back out at camp, back on the field. And so I do get it. Like, I totally understand the premise where Zach Charbonnet is the pass catcher. He's the goal line guy. I do think that, we still have seen Pete Carroll kind of has his loyalty to his guy. That's the starter. And I don't think you just take away a bunch of the reps from a guy who went out there and rushed for over 1,000 yards as a rookie and was as explosive as he is, but he does have his deficiencies. And I get that's why Zach Charbonnet is there. This one is interesting to me because I actually do agree with you, Dave, to an extent here. And I want to get Dwayne's opinion on this because I do think that this is one of those where if Kenneth Walker misses time, Zach Charbonnet is a potential league winner, to be quite honest. And so,
Yeah,
Dwayne, I'd love to hear your thought on that.
Yeah, no. Dave and I are agreeing too much. Maybe we need to stop the show and re-record. But no,
Wait, can
Charbonnet's.
I give a quick peek behind the curtain? So Dwayne has been on my old show, the Launchpad that I used to host. You came on back-to-back years, and our show sheet, we would find players that we disagreed on. We would like share our exposure with each other and say, well, I hate this guy and you like him. And we would just argue for an hour straight. So us being in agreement on a show is we're in new waters here, Dwayne.
Yeah, for sure. But I love Charbonnet. You named a lot of the reasons. He's one of my most drafted backs. He's in my top 3. He was my number 1 for a good bit. But I've been just kind of trying to diversify a little bit. But he's over 20% for me right now on Underdog. And the big part for me is like the profile. Again, like this is a guy in the model for us at Fantasy Life graded out in the 80th percentile. The hit rate over the first 3 years for guys that reach this point in the model, 40% of them go on to have a top 6 season in their first 3 years. 60% go on to have a top 24 season, and 80% go on to have a top 36 season. So obviously he lands in a situation where he's playing with another really good player that also has similar draft capital to him, right? So he's probably kind of blocked from some of these top end outcomes without an injury to Kenneth Walker. But I think he also is potentially a bigger blocker to Kenneth Walker than what people want to lead on. And so I like both players. I really love Kenneth Walker. I think he's the more explosive runner, like Dave said. I think the more complete player is Charbonnet. He could still passing downs. He could still carries inside the 5. I think he has a lot of outs to give you spike week production in a best ball league today. And the contingency value is through the roof because I love the Seahawks. Like, I think the Seahawks could be a top 5 offense this year. It's just an offense I want to have a lot of chips on. I don't care if like Metcalf's the toughest one because of the opportunity cost and other guys that go in his range, but you still like to have, who doesn't like to just even look at DK Metcalf with that pacifier in his mouth that he calls, a mouthpiece? He's just such a dominant, like looking dude. Like, who wants to play against DK Metcalf? We know he's a good player, but like where Lockett goes, I like it. Where JSN goes, I like it. Where Geno Smith goes, I like it. And Charbonnet, I really like. The one that's honestly the very toughest for me to click on is Walker. And this is after I just said earlier in the show, like things don't always have to be either or. So I'm acknowledging there's a way Walker is really successful. My challenge is what I have to pass on when I take Kenneth Walker is a lot different than what I have to pass on when I take Zach Charbonnet. And I'm building a lot of teams like you, Dave, not necessarily zeros, but heroes, right? I've got one running back and I'm getting to that group of receivers or that group of running backs where I'm getting to Charbonnet and all these guys. And I want to grab 2 or 3 of them, like between rounds like 9 and 13. And he's usually one of the guys in that group. So I really like that call by you.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good one. Honestly, I gotta say, I do think that Zach Charbonnet will provide value for a lot of fantasy managers that are able to draft him. What was that ADP for him again, Dave? Where is he getting drafted right now?
Well, he's down 20 spots since the Pete Carroll thing, but now he should start climbing. He literally dropped like almost
outside of the
spots.
top 100, I believe, right?
Yeah, he was like right around like 105 to 110. And the two DraftKings drafts I did today, he was like 125.
Yeah, he's 109 right now.
Yeah. So and that's probably underdog. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're able,
as soon as he popped up with that shoulder injury, I just started drafting more.
Indefinitely was the words I think that got everyone. They're like, whoa.
Yeah, and then he missed 2 days.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll just ruins everything for fantasy managers every single time.
Chris Carson, optimistic he'll be back tomorrow, out for his career, right?
Yeah. It's too soon for me to talk about Chris Carson. We can talk about that next offseason.
Sorry, we can stop. Sorry.
All right, I'm going to finish us off here with another running back. And Dave, I feel like you have heard me talk about this guy on, I don't know, probably half of the shows we have ever done together. But it's Khalil Herbert, the Bears running back. And for me, the thing is, I'm going to keep beating the drum for him, honestly, until otherwise, because I think that when you look at these players, what you want to look at when it's a, quote, sleeper is who has the possibility of outperforming their ADP, and as long as they stay healthy, and who has that talent, right? You want to bet on talent. And to me, we have already seen that Khalil Herbert is incredibly talented. He's a really good runner. In 2022, amongst running backs, at least 100 carries, Herbert was top 5 in missed tackles forced, yards after contact, rushing yards over expectation, and yards per carry. He was a very, very good running back last year for the Chicago Bears. And I get it. They went and they added Roschon Johnson in the draft, who A lot of people were excited. I was excited about Roschon Johnson as well as a prospect. And then they've added Deontay Foreman. And so I get it. You start to see a little bit of a crowded backfield. Roschon Johnson's already dealing with an injury in camp. And Deontay Foreman, for as good as he has been in Carolina, has not always been the guy. Like we talk about Khalil Herbert not being a good pass blocker or not a receiving down back. Like Deontay Foreman is worse. Deontay Foreman was one of the absolute worst pass blocking running backs in the league last season. So he's not stealing those reps away from Khalil Herbert. But if Roschon Johnson if he is healthy, that he may be taking some of that work. The thing for me is I'm not focused on what Khalil Herbert isn't. I know he's not the pass catcher, so I know he's probably not going to be a top 12 running back. What he gives me is a guy who right now is being drafted as the running back 37 in the 9th round, who last year was really, really good without much receiving work at all through the first 10 weeks last season. He was the running back 23 in PPR leagues, and that was while splitting time with David Montgomery, who I don't know, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think David Montgomery is a better player than any of the other running backs on this roster right now. And so maybe that's like putting it too much into like a tunnel vision here of saying, swapping out David Montgomery and bringing in 2 other guys, same thing. But I'm still very much in on Khalil Herbert, especially still at his price tag. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he might be the absolute cheapest running back to draft that could be the day one starter for an NFL team right now. I don't know if you guys can think of anyone else, but am I crazy for liking Khalil Herbert here?
I don't think you're crazy. I mean, we know he's a good running back. We've seen it for the last couple of years. Last year, he led the league in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. He led the league in rushing yards per attempt. My biggest fear with Khalil Herbert is that this coaching staff and this front office just don't like him. He was drafted by Ryan Pace for Matt Nagy offense, and now it's Ryan Poles in the front office for Eberflus's team. And I think that's what concerns me a little bit, because last year we saw the eye-popping efficiency, and he still couldn't jump ahead of David Montgomery on the depth chart. And I agree with, the fact that David Montgomery is better than what they currently have on the depth chart. But my fear is just that Khalil Herbert is going to be in a frustrating committee. I find myself, if I'm drafting anybody out of the Bears backfield, again, not trying to do with this or that, but I like Roschon Johnson because he profiles to be on the field for passing downs. And if there's like one guy that I said was likely to have a top 12 finish, I think that Roschon Johnson possesses that ceiling. I don't know if Khalil Herbert really can do much to crack the top 10. He'd need an obscene touchdown rate to get up there. So I like Khalil Herbert. I just worry that even if everything falls into place, he's still going to be like at best a top 20 running back.
Interesting. That's some strong words on the rookie Roschon Johnson as a guy with the potential to finish top 12. Like I get it. Like he can get the passing down work, but man, that was a little surprising to me, Dave.
Well, there exists a world realistically where Khalil Herbert leads the team in touches and finishes as the 3rd best fantasy scorer, because Roschon Johnson can get the passing down work, Deontay Foreman can get the goal line work, and then Khalil Herbert is just getting all of the junk touches between the 20s. And that's really my fear, is I don't see many paths for Khalil Herbert to end up getting a lot of high value touches in Chicago.
Interesting. I want to get Dwain's take on this because, Dave, I know you and I have kind of been at a stalemate on this, and I'm fairly certain Dwain's going to agree with you because that's how the show's been going. So let's hear it.
No, I think Khalil Herbert's the best back to draft in the backfield. I do. I think like he's shown us the most so far. I think Dave's concerns are correct. Like I worry about him on passing downs. They haven't trusted him there before. It's not something he was necessary. It'd be one thing like if we were like, oh, well, Khalil Herbert in college, like he did all this, right? And then maybe it's just, okay, finally they let him do it in the NFL. But that's not, what we have going on here with Herbert. So he probably is just this early down guy, but he is, to your point, Alfredo, like he's hyper explosive. Like this guy definitely has some talent. I think the thing is with the Bears, and again, I feel kind of bad because I know we want takes, but I don't think we have any clue. The thing that I worry about with Roschon, and I agree with Dave, like he is the guy that I would project for the passing down role. Like in my projections, I have Roschon projected to get like 40% of the passing downs, right? And the other guys to be like less than that. The challenge is like, he could also be nothing and be inactive. I mean, they have DJ Dallas, right, on the roster, and he's going to play special teams. Sorry, Travis Homer. Yeah, thank you.
One of
Travis
those
Homer on
Seattle
the
running
roster.
backs.
Yeah. Travis Homer on the roster. He's going to play special teams, so he's going to be active. So that means probably one of the other running backs could be inactive. Now, the thing is, in best ball, it's easier because you just need at some point for it to pay off. You don't need to know when it's going to be. In redraft, it's different. You won't ever know when to start them until one of the others is probably hurt. That's what my general feeling is on the Bears. Like, you're not going to ever feel super comfortable putting any one of these guys into your lineup unless another one is out for the week. And even then you're going to be like, oh, are they bringing up like someone else? And you got to deal with Justin Fields. So I'm just kind of mixing it up with the Bears. I'm not pretending to know. I think ADP is, generally speaking, like in the correct order on underdog. Right. I think over on DraftKings, it's actually a little bit different. It's Herbert, then Foreman, then Roshan. Roshan's been falling a little bit lately, like because he's hurt. But I do get a little worried with some of these rookies. We get so excited about them, and I'm old enough to remember Isaiah Spiller. We were taking him in round 12 last year at this time, and then by the beginning of the year, it's like, oh God, I can cut this guy. So in best ball, I think it's a little tougher. You could have a true dead roster spot also in one way, whereas in redraft, the plus is you could find out early and then cut bait like with the other one. So there's pros and cons to either way, but it's a backfield that honestly, when people have asked me, I've told them I think ADP is generally correct, and I'm just kind of sprinkling my bets out across all of them. But it's not like I'm taking a bear every draft. There's a lot of drafts where I don't take anyone from this backfield.
So what I've been saying is, like, if I had to bet on who finishes with the most points right now, I'd say it's Khalil Herbert. But if I had to bet on who is the most likely to finish inside the top 12, I'm thinking that's Roshan Johnson. And that's my fear, is that they're just, again, and we haven't even talked about Justin Fields all that much. We're talking about all of these running backs. We're not talking about the true goal line back, which is going to be Justin Fields, just tucking the ball and running near the goal line. So that's just kind of my fear, is that I worry that there is a very low ceiling for Khalil Herbert, even if everything works out well this year.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on the ceiling thing. Honestly, I don't think any of these running backs can be top 12 running backs on this team, even if everything goes right, just because of the situation, the offensive environment that they're in. I'm just such a firm believer that once good talent is on the field, it is so hard for coaches to take them off. And if Khalil Herbert gets those snaps, man, I don't see how that staff can take him off the field in favor of someone else.
Yeah, most fun to watch on the team, also Khalil Herbert. Like watching that dude play, watching him with a jump cut, watching him find the back door on his own play. Like Khalil Herbert is very enjoyable, like aesthetically pleasing, watching that dude run the football. So I feel you on that front.
He makes moves,
sure.
like the way he's able to anticipate moves in the open field, like when he'll just make this like subtle little break, and then it just allows him to pick up an extra 12, 15 yards. Like he's just one of those runners that has such a knack for the game that like can't be taught. Like it just comes naturally to him.
Well, we're going to continue with 3 more sleepers over on the audio version of this episode. If you want to get the full episode, just click the link in the description down below. This has been Sleepers to Target in your fantasy football drafts with our special guest here, Dwain McFarland. Thanks for watching.